6 September will go down as a landmark day in India's rights history. Gay sex, considered a taboo by many in socially conservative India, was decriminalized by a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court. The court ruled that any consensual sexual relationship between two consenting adults, whether homosexuals or heterosexuals, cannot be said to be unconstitutional. This was a reversal of its own 2013 judgment, and with that, history was made.
In the heart of the world's largest democracy, for a community existing at the edges of society, the yoke of a British colonial law has been lifted.
बहुत सालों के एक्टिविस्ट का काम है।
मैं आज समाज के सामने अपने आप को बोल सकती हूँ कि मैं ऐसा हूँ करके। Thank you so much, Supreme Court.
For the first time in history, a constitutional bench at the Supreme Court of India delivered a judgment after listening to arguments against its own previous judgment, and in an open court.
From now onwards, we are not criminal. We can live our life as who we are. We are really happy.
The outcome, the right to love another person, has been restored. Section 377 of the Indian Constitution, the 160-year-old law which was used to oppress the LGBTQ community, has been decriminalized.
But the harassment is not going to stop unless we have anti-discriminatory laws and anti-harassment laws, but like at least it's going to lessen it, so yeah.
I see a rainbow right in front of my eyes.
Jubilant crowds cheered and rights activists were overcome with emotion even as the judgment was being read out inside the Supreme Court. At the core of the watershed judgment were 3 fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution to all citizens of the country. Article 14, granting right to equality. Article 19, which ensures right to liberty. And Article 21, which grants the right to privacy. The 5-judge Supreme Court bench hearing the case announced to the courtroom that Section 377 was arbitrary. Consensual sex doesn't fall under Section 377, and consenting adults can have sex in private. It said prejudice must be conquered and inclusion be embraced. The bench added that only constitutional morality should influence law, not social morality. Discrimination on the basis of sexual choices violates freedom. Majoritarian views and popular morality cannot dictate constitutional rights. And that history owes an apology to members of the LGBTQ community. The judgment was delivered by a bench of Chief Justice of India Deepak Mishra and Justices Rohinton Nariman, A.M. Khanwilkar, D.Y. Chandrachud and Indu Malhotra. CJI Mishra and Justices Nariman, Chandrachud and Malhotra delivered separate concurring judgments.
Section 377 has been held to be unconstitutional if 2 consenting adults have sex in private. Whatever type of sex is not the business of the state. So if 2 consenting adults have sex of any type in private, that there is consent and it is in private, it will not be an offense under 377. So 377 has been held to be, to that extent, unconstitutional.
The Supreme Court has also ordered a relook into all pending cases related to Section 377, making it clear that there is no place for homophobia in India.
Supreme Court has actually recognized apologized and said that we're no longer fringe people. We're no longer people on the in basements, so we're not in the shadows anymore. I think that even for marriage equality and other equality, I think I want to leave it in the hands of the court more than I want to anyone else. Earlier, you had the people that were homophobic. They had the sort of backing of the law. So at least today, the law and the courts have said that we don't back homophobia anymore. We back the LGBTQ. Stop your discrimination. Let's work together as a society to actually be a non-discriminate country.
This heralds a new dawn for personal liberty and is a major milestone in the long-drawn fight for justice by the LGBTQ community in the country. But the battle is far from over.
It is a long fight, but finally we have achieved our goal and we have won this whole thing. And thank you Supreme Court, thank you Constitution Bench. This struggle is not for 1 year, 2 year, etc. It's about 25 years. Such a draconian law, which wasn't been practiced in the British country and which was imposed in India, and we were practicing it, irrelevant of our thinking and ideologies. And today the Supreme Court has delivered such a historical verdict. Thank you so much for that. The country is facing such an emergency. In the meantime, this judgment has given the boost to stand for our rights, and thank you for that. And then let's stand and talk for gender and sexuality and human rights. And the governments should work in favor of us to understand what we are.
This is with regard to relations between adults in the privacy of their home. Then the police has no right to raid their homes, and they were living under the fear of police Raj. So that's what the judgment has said. Judgment has not advocated gay marriage.
Not made it legal. Yes.
It has not endorsed gay marriage. It made at a later date deal with the question. But what was done is a very important thing, and which I think is correct, that it has removed the stigma.
This is a case which has seen the bookends of several courtrooms. For over 2 decades, it has gone from court to court, but no more. The final judgment has now been delivered.
The trigger for this landmark judgment was a writ petition filed against IPC Section 377 that criminalizes same-sex relationships. The petition, popularly known as Navtej Johar versus the Union of India, led the apex court to revisit the constitutionality of the law, leading to this historic day. Meet the men and women who challenged the archaic Article 377.
Navtej Johar, 56. He filed a writ petition against Section 377 that criminalizes same-sex relationships after the Apex Court's 2013 ruling that dismissed the 2009 Delhi High Court verdict saying the issue concerned only a minuscule fraction of the country's population. Sunil Mehra, 60. Journalist Sunil joined his partner of 2 decades, Navtej, in filing the writ petition in the Supreme Court. Ritu Dalmia, 45. Celebrity chef Ritu, who identifies herself as a lesbian, filed the petition when the Supreme Court reinstated Section 377. Ayesha Kapoor, 44. Ayesha is a businesswoman associated with the food and hospitality industry. Kapoor too joined forces to decriminalize Section 377. Aman Nath, 65. A well-known hotelier and restorer, Aman Nath joined the others in the curative petition. Keshav Suri, 33. The youngest of the group, Suri is the executive director of the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group, which owns the Lalit Hotel. Suri has been at the forefront of increasing public space for the LGBTQ community. He filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court in April challenging Section 377.
It's been a long journey to this verdict. The law against gay sex was introduced during the British rule of India almost a century and a half ago. It banned carnal intercourse against the order of nature, which was mostly interpreted as a ban on homosexual sex. The battle to legally repeal this stifling law began in 2001.
The case against 377 in India was first made in 1994 by AIDS Bhedbhav Virodhi Andolan, India's first AIDS activist movement based out of New Delhi.
It had been very traumatic because I never expected the government would put me in jail for supporting the community which I belong to at the same time, but doing health HIV prevention work. So I never thought it would be a crime, but they put us in jail because they perceived that we are helping the community which is supposedly criminal. And we spent 47 days in jail, and they were horrible. Being denied of drinking water for almost 10 days, being beaten up regularly by the police and the fellow prisoners. It was horrible. It took me 7 years to face the police again. I never had the courage because I developed a phobia. The way the police treated me, I made sure that every time I go to the police station, I have a lawyer with me. But yes, after this verdict, I said it is worth it.
Then in 2001, Naz Foundation filed a lawsuit in Delhi High Court seeking legalization of homosexual intercourse between consenting adults. Both the petitions were dismissed by the court. Naz Foundation then knocked on the doors of the Supreme Court, which directed the Delhi High Court to reconsider the case on its merits. In 2009, the case came up before a two-judge bench of then Chief Justice A.P. Shah and Justice S. Muralidhar. On July 2, 2009, the judges delivered a judgment which drew a collective gasp from all those present in the courtroom. Not only did they deem Section 377 as an impediment to public health, they tied their judgment to Articles 21, 14 and 15 of the Indian Constitution, deeming that all citizens of the country had the rights to equality, liberty, dignity and to life. The judgment did not strike Section 377 down completely. The section was declared unconstitutional insofar it criminalized consensual sexual acts of adults in private. A nationwide celebration erupted. Soon after the Delhi High Court reading down Section 377, a flurry of appeals were filed in the Supreme Court challenging the High Court order. These appeals were from private individuals as well as several religious bodies. Some of the petitioners were Suresh Kumar Kaushal, Krantikari Manuvadi Morcha, BP Singhal, Trust God Ministries, Apostolic Churches Alliance, Utkal Christian Council, All India Muslim Personal Law Board, S.K. Tijarawala Baba Ramdev, and Joint Action Council, Kannur.
All the religious.
On 11th of December 2013, responding to the appeals and deliberating for several months, the Supreme Court of India upheld the constitutionality of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. Not only did the court go so far as to say that it was the job of the legislature to change laws, it went on to call the queer community a minuscule minority because only 200 people had ever been prosecuted under Section 377. For a community which had just begun coming out of the closet, this was a massive setback. India went back to becoming part of the 79 countries where being gay is illegal. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Nigeria, Sudan and Iran. A review petition was filed in the Supreme Court soon after the verdict of 2013. It was dismissed. Congress MP Shashi Tharoor brought up a private member's bill in Parliament twice. The motion was defeated on both occasions.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for leave to introduce a bill further to amend the Indian Penal Code 1860.
That leave be granted to introduce the bill Those in favor में से aye.
Aye.
Those against में से no. No.
It was only in 2016 that the Supreme Court admitted a curative petition to relook its 2013 judgment. This itself was a historic moment because in India, 99% of curative petitions have been dismissed and the remaining are never heard in an open court.
The fact that individuals actually also filed petitions, which made it so much more powerful, because now you finally had people who were gay saying that, look, our lives are being affected because of this archaic law, right? So it's really made a lot of difference.
Then in July 2017, after 4 days of marathon hearing on this case, the Constitutional Bench reserved its judgment, saying they will examine whether it is permissible under constitutional morality to criminalize sexual acts performed by consenting adults. In August 2017, the Supreme Court ruled privacy as a fundamental right, adding sexual orientation is an essential attribute of privacy, raising the hopes of those campaigning against Section 377.
The United Nations has welcomed the judgment, calling it the first step towards ensuring full fundamental rights to the LGBT community. LGBTQ activists across the world have fought against the draconian laws in the past. Here's the full story.
Section 377 was drafted by Thomas Babington Macaulay around the year 1838. But it was only brought into effect in 1860 in light of the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. Macaulay derived this particular law from the Buggery Act of 1533, which was enacted under the reign of King Henry VIII of England. A law that defined buggery as an unnatural sexual act against the will of God and man, thus criminalizing homosexuality. Homosexuality was decriminalized in 1967 in the UK. The fight for equal rights for the queer community goes back 49 years, to the early hours of June 28, 1969, when New York City police raided Stonewall Inn, a gay pub in Greenwich Village. Fed up of police brutality and being constantly roughed up, angry patrons and neighborhood residents hung around outside the bar rather than disperse when the police showed up. At one point, an officer hit a lesbian over the head as he forced her into the police van. She shouted to onlookers to act, inciting the crowd to begin throwing bottles, cobblestones, and other objects at the police. Within minutes, a full-blown riot involving hundreds of people began. The riots continued for 5 consecutive days. The city of New York saw unprecedented protest marches and angry standoffs with the police at various places. A year later, in 1970, the Pride Parade was born to commemorate the uprising at Stonewall in 1969. Netherlands was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage in 2001. It all started in the 80s when a group of gay rights activists asked the government to allow same-sex couples to marry. though the ban on homosexuality in the country was lifted way back in 1811. Most recently, on December 7, 2017, Australia legalized the same-sex marriage, overcoming age-old conservative laws. Another country which allowed same-sex marriage in 2017 was Germany. On the 1st of October 2017, a legislation was passed giving full marital and adoption rights to same-sex couples. In the Republic of Ireland, same-sex sexual activity was decriminalized in 1993. It was in 2015 that the Catholic majority country legalized same-sex marriage through a constitutional referendum where 62% voted in favor. In the United Kingdom, the LGBTQ rights are only limited to England, Scotland and Wales. In Northern Ireland, same-sex marriage is still not legal. In the United States of America, homosexuality has been legal nationwide since 2003. In 2015, same-sex marriage became legal all across the 50 states in the USA after a landmark Supreme Court declaration. But there are around 70 countries in the world where gay relationships are still prosecuted and persecuted. In Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Malaysia and Pakistan, homosexuality is still a crime. While in some Middle Eastern states like Iran, Saudi Arabia and Yemen, homosexuality is punishable by death under the Sharia law. Love is finally in the air. The Supreme Court of India on the 6th of September 2018 sent out a message, firm and strong in its resolve to free love of the chains of history. The choice to love has been taken out of the purview of restrictive societies and restraining governments. Who to love is once and for all a personal choice of each and every Indian. Love has shed the shackles of archaic morality. Indians today should rejoice, for India stands guarantor to the freedom to love anybody, of any sex, of any orientation.
The battle still continues for the LGBTQ community. There are age-old prejudices that need to overcome. But now, with the law on their side, it might just get a bit easier. Thank you for watching. The special report news and updates continue.